to profit out of this crisis. And we need to do it, we need to present an alternative, a systemic alternative, both at the level of the economic policy, at the level of the income distribution and the international division of labor, at the level of the capitalist mode of production as the systemic regulator of the whole society, but also in terms of an alternative horizon of civilization, an alternative mode of life. So the tactical chores, the tactical tasks had to be combined with strategic horizon right now. And that requires a very agile and fluid coordination among the progressive forces in the world. Because we are facing an oligarchical agenda with very precise and very specific demands that have been furthering the neoliberal agenda as we are talking. Beneath the pinky discourse about cooperation, international cooperation, the G20, what has happening right now is a furthering of the neoliberal policies everywhere, in every front. In terms of the free trade agreements, in terms of the furthering of the WTO, in terms of the financial deregulation, in terms of the advance of the monopolic accumulation by dispossession, etc., etc., etc. We need to stop this agenda because they have no solution for humanity. And that is why what I will try to show you with some very brief details because we don't have too much time, so it's a kind of impressionist snapshot for you to read. The point, the essentiality of this problem came out of the formation of profits. Capital is prisoner of its own success. Too much technology, too many merchandises, too cheap merchandises do not allow to form the adequate rate of profit for monopoly capital. More so, the introduction of new technologies rendered the previous ones obsolete in terms of competition, without giving even the time to discount the cost of the fixed capital investment. So this crisis of overproduction has created a long-term impasse since the 60s in which the counter-tendencies that usually provoke this relationship between the mode of regulation, that means the mix of economic policies and institutions, and the regime of accumulation, that means the rhythm and orientation of investment, the income distribution patterns, to a situation with a dead end. And that has been exploded right now. What has been the temporary solution in terms of profitability, neoliberal regime of accumulation, with this new pressure, this new transfer of cost to the south, this exacerbation of unequal exchange, both in economic and ecological terms, has exploded right now. They had run out of ammunition. So look at this. You can find this type of situations of idle capacity, industrial capacity in the north, and the transfer of the industrial power to the semi-peripheries. It's a long-term process. This is not a unique process. It happens with the reconstruction of Europe, the reconstruction of Japan, with Taiwan, the Southeast Asia countries, and now with China and India, but now with a huge disproportionality. Because the creative destruction in the center, in the Western countries, had not been enough in terms of the destruction of productive capital to eliminate the overproduction crisis. When in China and in India and in other so-called emerging economies, you have additional capabilities that have exploded the overall possibilities of production. So the problem of overproduction of merchandises have been exacerbated, but also the problem of overproduction of capital. We are in the middle of an overaccumulation of capital. And the problem is, as the possibilities, the horizon of productive capital has shrunk, The only possibility is to create new options in terms of financial innovation. So delocalization and financialization are the main remedies to the structural crisis since the 60s that have exploded with this crisis. That has created a pattern of income distribution based on more polarization, like in this case of the United States, that present the same type of accumulation in the top 1% of the population that presented in the previous structural crisis in the crash of the 30s. And the same happens in the whole world, even with the exception of China, with the reduction of poverty in China, in India, in other specific countries. The problem of inequality is present, aggravating the problem of underconsumption. This reduction of the rate of profit during the 60s, here in the thick black line, was overcome with the introduction of the neoliberal policies in the center, but do not forget that the basic point was the whole amount of surplus value that went from the global south to the north, using as an instrument, as the main tool, this financial imperialism, the external debt. The increase of the interest rate of the United States, the strengthening of the dollar, the increase of the nominal service of the debt, the desperation of all the countries to obtain some surplus in dollars to pay the debt and to cheapen all the merchandises, reduce the price of our exports, and all of this created a situation of devaluation of the nature and the human labor in the periphery, in a huge subsidy to the north through different mechanisms that include the self-exploitation of the community, especially of the women's work, the non-visible women's work in the market, to the financial monopolies. This situation created, of course, an improvement in terms of profitability, but with dire costs. You can see here the evolution, the co-evolution between the wage share of the GDP and the consumption was broken with the introduction of the neoliberal policies, with this increasing consumption, but based on over-indebtment because the compression of salaries. So you don't have a problem, you don't have only a problem of weakness in character. This is a structural problem. Over-indebtment is a structural problem. Without the over-indebtment, the world could experiment a recession 30 years ago. A permanent recession during the last 30, 40 years. And the other side of the same coin is precisely that increase in profitability here in the black line, but this reduction in the productive investment possibilities. Again, this gap is fulfilled only with financial innovation, speculation. So the hypertrophy of the speculative apparatus is not an excess, an irrational exuberance. It's a structural problem that cannot be reverted. The world, the way of existence of capital today is financial speculative capital of another type, a superior type. And the problem is that they cannot return to production not because they have a technological impasse. They have plenty of innovations that they cannot deploy because they are counterproductive. More innovation than what has been already deployed could produce more overproduction with a further compression of the profit rate. And that is why the process of concentration and centralization of capital resides basically in further and further speculation, further and further bubbleization, further and further destabilization, conflict, and perpetual war. And that is the agenda of the oligarchical powers today. We don't have too much time to go into the details. Let me present to you. This is going to be delivered for you with some figures and data for you reflection, let me just present some important points in terms of the alternatives. We need to create, facing this colossal process of expropriation, of self-determination of the individuals, of the collectivities, of the nations, of entire continents, in which the financial crises are an instrument of political pressure, are a structural mechanism of a new balance of power in favor of the financial oligarchy, we need to create the option, power to the people, empowerment at the local level, at the subnational level, at the grassroots organizations, the recovery of the nation-state capabilities, including a sovereign economic policy and a sovereign system of credit, sub-regional and regional alternatives of integration in order to create a multipolar world that could dispute in real terms the unipolarity of the Anglo-American oligarchical agenda. And in order to do this, we need to pay attention to one of the main pillars of this situation. The first one is very obvious, the military power of NATO. But the second one, even much more powerful in some aspects, is the international monopoly of dollar and the international dominion of the Anglo-American financial circuits all around the globe, imposing its logic into the productive apparatus of every geography. So we need to create a new planetary agenda that could use, for example, the special voting rights that are a virtual currency issued by the IMF without the possibility of imposing conditions, and that is why they don't like this instrument. And then, breaking the monopoly of the dollar, we could have money enough not only to support policy space for the small countries, for all the countries in the world, not only the United States and Europe, but also we could provide alternatives to solve the problems of extreme poverty, famine, environmental crisis, and humanitarian catastrophes like what happened in Haiti, in Pakistan, floods, earthquakes, etc. We have plenty of resources to do this. The problem is who controls the liquidity and which are the channels of distribution of that liquidity. We need to implement a series of alternatives in terms of curbing speculation, like banning short selling, banning speculation in the food and the energy markets, creating the financial transaction tax, separating the productive finance from the speculative finance, creating transparency in the public contracts of the public debt, like the audit and the moratorium of the debt that Ecuador implemented 3 years ago, that reduced the outstanding stock of the debt in 2/3 in 10 months, relieving a lot of the resources for the fiscal sector in order to generate productive and social investment, etc. Okay, let's go quickly. We need to create other options in terms of the construction of this sovereign system of credit, like what we are doing in the case of Latin America, the new regional financial architecture that includes a pillar based on a new type of development bank, a new type of financial support that do not reside in the conditions of efficiency, between quotes, that these distorted markets create, but imposes the priorities of the basic needs of the people. A new concept of sovereignty, a continental sovereignty related to food, healthcare, energy, knowledge production, natural resources, the construction of infrastructure, not based upon the needs of the North, but based in the needs of another social construction of the space that could create endogenous possibilities of prosperity, and the conditions that could render all these heterogeneous logics of production from the popular economy viable, replicable, and sustainable. We need to create a new type of central banking. No the consular interest of the IMF and the oligarchical financial networks, but the financial safety net that could provide defense against the possibilities of speculative attacks. We can create an alternative, a regional alternative to the IMF with the resources of Latin America and with the new possibilities that the institutionality that we are creating around the new institutions of UNASUR, the Union of South American Republics, could provide. And finally, we need to create a new type of money. Not the money that is the instrument of speculation, exploitation, exclusion, discrimination, expulsion of the people from their jobs, but money as the validation of the work of the people. Money based on the systems of payment compensation that could preclude any possibility of more speculation. We have already an instrument very different from the euro. It's called Sucre, that it has been operating for almost 2 years now among the ALBA countries, with all new perspectives that could be replicated at the local level, building up local circuits of payments and alternative currencies that could open the doors for the deployment of local resources without the participation of the loan sharks, without the participation of the big corporations, but only in the mobilization of the